gosh, it looks
Why are
like
you
I'm
so
on,
orange?
I know, it looks like I'm on Mars.
Fireball.
Wow.
Fireball.
I am
Right?
hello and welcome to episode 24 of Lawfully Chaotic.
Hi,
My awesome co-hosts, Sharon Smith, Barry Bott, and Jason Baldrick of TTRPG
Whoa,
Academy
you said
are
my
here
whole
with
name?
me. Of course. Oh, was I not supposed to? SS. No, that's no good. How about Barry Bott?
SS Barry Bott.
SS.
There you go, name of a ship.
Right. Anyway, tonight we got a good conversation queued up. I think we're gonna talk about pop culture and how it has influenced the game, and vice versa, how the game has influenced pop culture. I think the first thing that comes to everybody's mind right now is Eddie Munson and the Hellfire Club from Stranger Things. Exactly. Yeah, I love that photo of him, which is why I used it.
Yeah, so perfect.
Totally. So anyway, yeah. So Sharon, you wanna jump us? Well, does anybody have any announcements?
Yeah.
Get more excited, Jason.
I'm here.
Hey, welcome.
I'm here. I guess.
Sharon.
I guess a couple good announcements. I'm probably going to focus on opening 2 more tables over the next couple weeks.
Hey.
I know both of my Saturday games, with the exception of Grain Lands, which probably still has another 3-4 months in it. My Age of Empire game is probably in the final stages of a 90-day arc, because they are level 15 now, I think. So they're on their way to tier 4 Principality, which will be kind of fun. And I'm exploring some new, you know what, my Wednesday night game, I'm exploring some new methods that I used to be afraid of playing. The entire Wednesday night game is going to be a summer-long dungeon crawl. So I'm playing and toying with things that I haven't, thought about before. I'm using Tailspire very differently with it. It still feels very campaigny, but it's all kind of, this secret cult lair that they have to make their way through. And I'm kind of being a little loosey-goosey with the short rest versus the long rest, and give it that, because they went down below at 2:00 in the morning, which actually prompted it to make it a lot easier for you to make those alterations and adapt things. So it was interesting. So my Wednesday game is kind of taken on, and that has 1 seat open. So if you're interested, go check out D&D Club. Our Wednesday game, Adventures in Nicodranus, there is a seat open for that one. It probably will close in a couple weeks, because this was only meant to be a 20-week long campaign, and we're almost halfway through. But if you've ever wanted to learn how to play and you want to kind of get into a more traditional environment, Wednesday nights at 7:00 is our Nicodranus Adventures. So head on over to D&D Club and check it out.
Awesome. Cool. Sharon, what about you?
Nothing really. I mean, I'm just over at the D&D Club on Saturdays with Jason here for the Graying Lands. The campaign is really awesome.
We had a fun session last week. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, we did.
And somebody finally got their stuff.
And I made a terrible joke with it, which was great.
Do we want to know?
That was brewing for so long. Okay.
Now you gotta share it. You opened the box.
Sharon's gotta share.
You really want to fuel the cringe?
Yeah. Oh, that when it's certified Sharon cringe. Absolutely.
Look who you're talking with here. Come on.
Okay. Let me just set it up by saying how I worked very hard on this homebrew item.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And
a magic item?
It is. Yeah. Yes, it's a magic item.
Okay.
So, I'll say pretty things about it first before I drop the bomb. So it's called the Staff of Resolve, and it's a druidic staff, and it is meant to obviously support the druid and also help her friends if they are in dire need. And there are kind of like there are stones ascribed to each member of the group, and there's a special function for them that when an event happens, the runes on the bottom of the staff will glow, and the stones associated with the person will crack and break. So, I had to pick a special type of wood for this awesome staff. It's made out of yew wood, because I would choose a staff made out of yew.
Oh, it was great, and she loved it so much because it was her joke. So it was awesome because it can be a little cringy when you're making like wood references and stuff like that. But then we just started playing with it, and it was like, I was like YOU or YEU wood, ha 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 ha, and she was like you. But one of the things I love to do is I love having players build their own weapons and their own magical items, and then creating like little backstory arcs for how they're going to include it. So it's awesome.
I gotta get back on track with my homebrew magic items. I stopped at 30, and it's time to get back on.
Continue on. Yeah,
I get so involved with like the meaning behind things, and like there's a reason why I chose this type of wood. Is because like in Celtic mythology, yew wood represents life and rebirth. So I think this staff is perfect for my character because her whole thing is about light and dark, life and death, and
And I got to ask you something, Barry. Did you realize you inadvertently created an altar through the tree? And that's like a focus, right? Because that's kind of like a focus of your character type and what you do. After that session we had, I wrote 3 pages of a page of epilogue, a page of prologue, and then a page of how I felt that tree was going to evolve over time. And assuming you make it to level 20 and, we conclude the campaign and everything's solid, I want to include it as part of your, farewell or your homage to the idea of, that particular campaign. It just really felt like I thought you purposely... Yeah. I felt like you were doing that intentional, but it felt intentional. You know what I mean? Like now we've got that life tree, which by the way, it's a yew tree, right? And now it's going to be a beacon to all the other Kalishtar. So now it's because of what you and the others did to secure the valley, that tree has become this magical altar, which is what the very kind of like idea of your character was at the beginning, which I thought was amazing. Yeah, it's a good example of how we stumble across something sometimes.
Yeah, and it's supposed to resemble hope too. So like, that's Mira's whole MO too. And like, for any travelers that come to that city, that they'll be reminded of that tree.
Yeah,
so,
that's awesome. Yew is also the traditional wood that they used to make longbows out of.
Yep, very flexible, very sturdy. I guess, Brian, do you have anything going on lately?
I have lots of stuff going on. I finally got my hats in.
I saw that. That looks pretty cool.
I had the only way I can it's reversed. The only way I can do this logo on a hat, it's too detailed to embroider, is a PVC like rubber patch, and it turned out just perfectly. So
that's awesome.
It was like a 3-month process to source it and work back and forth with them. But hats are finally in, so I'll have those up in the shop soon. What else? I got a lot of things in the hopper. We'll just leave it at that.
So I think that's a good segue, since we were talking about the yew wood, the Irish kind of background of something, the cultural background of something, the natural background of something. I think I saw a really cool meme. I wish I had saved it to kind of for us to share with each other, but how dare you tell me the truth about my fantasy, right? That's always been the kind of underlayment of the idea of playing these games and being involved in these games. So our topic that we kind of all agreed upon last well, last week or the week before, I don't
2
remember.
weeks
Did
ago.
Before.
Yeah, week before, because I know Barry got busy, and oddly enough, I was busy, and turned out I had wasted my time. But anyways, we were busy last week.
It's well intentioned.
Yeah, but 2 weeks ago, we started chatting about game systems, game mechanics. Well, not really. We tangented into game mechanics, which was a huge mistake on my part.
That's more.
Yeah, no, I know.
Whoopsie.
And that's kind of what happens with old gamesters like me and Brian, is that we become so tunnel visioned on something that we used to be so passionate about. We forget and we close our ears to the stuff that we were supposed to be talking about. So, as we do better in the future, I really do appreciate sharing your feedback and the fact that you called us to task. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. I think a lot of people are afraid for those kind of reflective moments, which
Focus. Just focus.
Which then inspired our bullet list, this amazing bullet list. Yeah, I know, right? The butterfly effect game I want to work on. So the bullet list was broken down into four points. I'm going to summarize the list, and then I kind of want to have each of us talk about our own generational interpretations of the list as a whole, and then we can all break it down and kind of get a feel for where we think, like, is it too tropey to say we're in the golden age of gaming in general? I mean, between console games, PC games, tabletop games, board games, has social media in general, and the way media has really opened up a large online community. Has that become the tugboat to the idea of the golden age of gaming? I mean, we're in a new kind of renaissance period. But quick summary here. So this was a list that I had in my head, but somebody else did a better job of pulling things out of thin air and actually organizing them. And I think a real telltale sign of this, if you're a fan of Stranger Things and if you're a fan of Joe Mangalenga and the others, I love the nerds. I'm an Irish guy. I refuse to speak Italian.
Joe Manganello.
Manganenga. Joe Manganenga. Yeah, right. From nerds to jocks. The idea of the transitioning of a particular type of society culture that disparaged the intelligent and disparaged the nerd and encouraged the jock, right? And I love that part of it. Movies inspired by D&D, I think, is a real solid reference to go both ways of the spectrum, either via book to movie to book. I think we could all agree on the Conan.
You also have to take into account which of these did D&D have an influence on and which had an influence
and vice
on
versa.
D&D.
Yeah. The throughput idea, right?
Yeah.
Like I really like the fact you add Excalibur to that list, Cher. Most people wouldn't, because they're not, I'll be honest, they're not nerdy enough to really understand what that movie meant to a lot of us old X-Gen players.
Yeah. I
mean, I had that on a VHS tape that was so worn out, from replay. I'm Irish heritage. I'm third generation Irish from Londonderry, County Donegal, is my generational heritage. I've been to Ireland 4 times. It's a wonderful country.
No way.
I love my Brits. I love my Irish, and I love my Celts, and I love my Scots.
I've been there once. Where did you say now? Londonderry. I think I've been there once. 2 pubs.
Okay. Anyways, let's silence Brian really quick here. Where's that button? So I love the way that there's obviously an age difference between the 3 of us. I was so thrilled to
between 2 of us and 1 of us.
Well, but I think our experiences are unique. I have a very West Coast X generation surfer, beach skater, underground nerd experience in the Southwest. I think, Brian, you probably had more of a Midwest, East Coast experience, and then Barry Bot's the newer generation that's coming into this general, idea of establishing their relationship with these games. I was so amazed to see that you put Excalibur on there. That made me feel so good. I would say the only thing I didn't see on here, which most people wouldn't know about, is the D&D reference at the beginning of ET. That was
Yes, I
an
was thinking about putting
amazing,
that in there.
yeah, but I wasn't sure if it fit because,
Yeah.
once again, Stranger Things felt like the entire breadth of its content was D&D-ish.
It was very intentional.
It's very, so the idea, good point, intention versus unintended, right?
Right.
The D&D shows.
It can be argued, though. I was actually thinking of ET and that it should be on here. I mean, there's no rules for this, but
critiquing my notes.
First of all, I'm not that brave. Second of all, that D&D reference at the beginning of the movie E.T. felt more like that early Gygax marketing ploy. Like, that's when he started to hang out in Hollywood between 81 and 88. He was in Hollywood a lot, and that was his scene as TSR was expanding. So I kind of felt like he was at a party and was talking to a producer or something, and maybe overheard a producer say, well, I need the kids to be playing something, but I don't want it to be Monopoly. I don't want it to be these stupid board games. What do I do? And then I just imagine... hold on, let me finish, because I just imagine his giant Gygax head is buried in a giant pile of cocaine, and it lifts up out of that giant pile of cocaine.
Just like a cloud.
He looks over to see the conversation, and he says, I got the game for you. And, he's got his book.
My little game.
Oh, my gosh.
Maybe. I don't know. I just like my fantasy not to be interrupted by truth from time to time.
Okay, so that you tend to overanalyze certain things.
I'm an analytical person from my
background.
You are,
yeah, and I don't fault you for that.
It's very true.
I think that, be that as it may, and I don't argue that point with you. That could very well be the case. However, I look at E.T., that little scene, two ways. One is that it shows that the kids were fantasy driven and imagination driven. Okay, and I think that had an aspect to the story.
Yeah, definitely.
Also, to my knowledge, that is the first time that Dungeons and Dragons appeared in a TV show or a movie, and to me, that's a pretty important thing.
Yeah, in a not negative way.
Not in a negative
point.
way.
Yeah, up to that point,
panic. But
yeah,
there's a bunch of kids sitting around, and their mom is right there,
it was just subtle.
Yeah, and they're playing D&D. So I actually think that it has more importance than a lot of people give it credit for that very reason, because it gave people who have heard the term but had no clue what it was about, even a tiny little 1.5 minute insight into what actually goes on when you play D&D. Well, you sit around a table and you got a bunch of pieces of paper and some little figures and some dice. So I definitely think E.T. belongs on the
Talk to me about the D&D shows, Sharon. What inspired you on that part of the list?
Oh, well, I was just thinking because currently nowadays there's a lot more involvement with D&D in general, just like how you guys mentioned in movies back in the 80s. There was just subtle nods. There wasn't much I'm not sure if were there movies that were negatively portraying D&D back then?
I would think the only one was the one that Tom Hanks did.
Which one was that?
Mainstream Trolls and Mazes, or Mazes and Trolls, or whatever it was called.
Really?
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, I'll look it up and give you the precise name. It was basically a kind of approach to a very unique, dark time of the game when a college kid went a little apeshit and ended up playing out the game in the sewers in the local city that he was in. And got lost and died, or he was murdered in the sewers, and then it got turned into that Tom Hanks movie.
Okay, next episode of Lawfully Chaotic, we're not going to talk. We're going to show that movie.
That is so dramatic. Oh my gosh.
Mazes and Monsters.
Mazes and Monsters.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a really good, actually, it's a really good, since we're on the idea of culture, and then I want to have Barry talk some more about why she picked those shows, because I think that is a very culture-driven list that she's picked, and it shows a very difference in the way that we consumed it and reused it in the 80s and 90s, and the way the modern pop culture generations are consuming it and reusing it. It feels like we've hit that point where when we played it was dough and we were cooking dough. Now I feel like with Barry Bot's generation, they're dicing up the ingredients, they're picking out things that make sense, they're assembling it, they're using seasonal ingredients that make sense, they're using salt and garlic, and they're making that flavor of it. You know, I feel like the emotional link to the newer generation, which I happen to enjoy. I love everything on that list that you put on there. I love the fact you put Avatar on there. I think that's a very D&D show.
It totally
so really quick,
is.
Paradox says there were other references of Bad Light on D&D in the 80s. What?
Oh yeah, there were. Absolutely.
Really?
But when you have someone like Tom Hanks in a movie that's Hollywood driven, I mean, to me, that's the one that stuck out the most. Oh, dare they burn books. Nazis.
Really?
It happened. It was a real thing.
My parents,
it was interesting to watch.
And my friends, our parents didn't. They knew we were playing. They knew what the game was about. They didn't. It was never a concern for them. We weren't going out making goat sacrifices.
So D&D like shows. Every one of those
I love. At least no more than once a month.
Yeah.
So for D&D like shows, I've curated a list. It's basically more about the nowadays type of shows, because back then there wasn't really that much exposure.
Not much, yeah.
So at the very top of the list, I obviously put Critical Role, and then what?
Who?
I mean, I just put that there. I mean, I don't know why.
Never
it just popped into my head. Dimension 20. Stranger Things. I don't know if you guys heard of Stranger Things. It's a really great show. The Witcher. It's on Netflix. Great show. Great game. Played the Blood and Wine DLC. It was perfect. Game of Thrones and Avatar. So a lot
Avatar
of these...
is a... Go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of these shows have a lot of like D&D like influences. Like it totally meshes well with like the concept of what D&D is and what it's about. Ooh,
I would never have thought to put Avatar on there. That's interesting that you did.
But what's really interesting about this first two parts of the list, which I love, is that I will tell you, I immediately fell in love with Sharon. Not only did she include Excalibur, but the ultimate nerdy animation film, The Last Unicorn.
Yes!
That for me was like a bag of Skittles falling in my lap. It was.
You did
love
forget
that one.
Legend and Labyrinth are both awesome. You forgot Neverending Story.
That's right. Oh.
See, and Dubtech, Lord of the Rings is on there. It's at the top. It's up in our movie-inspired D&D, because what we, Wheel of Time.
Wheel of Time.
And I do like Twisted Duo's reference about the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Now, to be fair to the cartoon industry, all the cartoons sucked in the 80s. Let's just
even
be
the Lord of the
straightforward.
Rings animated movie.
Well, that was Rotoscope. That was Rotoscope. But I'm going to be brutally aesthetically honest about the cartoons in the 80s. They were horrible. Now, some were graphically horrible, but had really cool stories, right? Some looked unique, like watching Robotech for the first time on mainstream TV, which was so super D&D to me during that time of my life. All of these are the hero's journey. Everything that we've referenced so far is, and I don't want to make it sound like we're going to call it a drug, but heroine or hero back in the 80s and 90s, that was the hero or the heroine's journey. As far as I'm concerned, a hero is genderless to me. A hero is a hero.
I gotta jump in. You ever watch Chappelle Show with Rick James? The Rick James kid. Man, cocaine is a hell of a drug.
Yeah.
And D&D is a hell of a drug.
But it's like, go ahead. Go for it.
two-part question. First part, what
Mhm.
movie do you feel had the most influence on the game? One movie.
The most influence?
Well, once
I'm
again,
gonna
are we
I'm gonna have
thinking
to
about
go with
modern terms of influence or
no.
overall influence?
Overall, specifically overall.
I
I'm
think
gonna
Lord of the
and
Rings.
I'm gonna say Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
It'd have to
I mean
be.
that basically is D&D.
It's the hero's journey. It's all the different races. It's all the intertwining storylines and the plots. It's
But here's
very.
where, yeah, I don't necessarily disagree or agree with that because once again, I think it's based on how a generation absorbs it.
Okay, so Matt, Twisted UO, hold that thought for a sec,
okay,
because that's part 2.
yeah.
So Jason, what? Just you got to give us one.
I would say the movie that really felt super D&D to me was probably David Bowie's movie Labyrinth. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why I go down that, because I'm more of
Yeah.
the
I
kind of
agree.
aesthetically wild interpretive story. Like it
you
had
forgot
just
Willow.
enough. Willow's another one,
Oh.
but
Yeah.
once again, it's based on how you absorb it, because the challenge I have with Lord of the Rings is that it was already an amazing book that was going to inspire generations of first-time creators.
Mhm.
Now,
I
if you're
think
going to talk about the modern connection to the golden era of D&D that began about 5 to 10 years ago, I would
hold on,
definitely say,
hold on, hold that thought.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
part 2.
Okay.
I will say that I do feel that Lord of the Rings is the opposite equation. I think Lord of the Rings had a massive influence on the creation of D&D, whereas I think
Correct.
D&D had an influence on Labyrinth.
Correct.
Now,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. Now, part 2 is modern influence in this new world, pursuant to your 5 to 10 years, or even 5 years. One movie or show that has been key in bringing D&D to the forefront. And I'm not talking about Critical Role. I'm not talking about podcasts. I'm talking about a TV show. Or
Right,
movie.
right,
And
right.
that's where I'm going to go with Stranger
I mean,
Things.
I already know my answer.
What's
Because
that?
it covers both the gaming culture and the physical culture. Big Bang
Mhm.
Theory.
Yeah.
Big Bang Theory. It
Oh,
changed.
wow. That's a
It
good
changed
one.
everything.
That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
shows, and I totally forgot about that.
It
So Lord of the
changed
Rings
everything
is-
from a very reflective perspective of the nerd getting the girls. And not only was the
Yeah.
show itself a hero's journey for both women and men, but they were so transparent in their nerdism that it played out in these amazing, very kind of D&D-esque influential ways. And it really brought in a narrative of a very uniquely evolved culture of a generation. And to me, if it's strictly TV, mainstream, having an
Or movie.
influence, Big Bang Theory definitely, I think, had a huge influence
Wow.
on Hollywood. I think it had an amazing influence on Hollywood.
Mhm.
I'm gonna.
Yeah.
Well, Sharon, I want to hear your answer.
Yeah.
So obviously it's Stranger Things, but before I even jumped to D&D, like the show that I watched that had the elements of D&D, I mean, you guys might cringe, but it's Supernatural. I think Supernatural was a very D&D-esque show because it's about two brothers fighting against, the hordes of hell and having to
Supernatural is a great example. Yeah.
contend with demons and spirits, and they use magic and alchemy. So
and they're very much anti-heroes, which I really love that aspect of them.
I guess did Supernatural. I guess my question is, what show served to keep the wheel in motion or accelerate the wheel of getting the game out into the mainstream? I actually, as much as Stranger Things is great, Big Bang didn't occur to me, and I think that's a fantastic correlation, actually.
Well, but go ahead, Cher.
Well, it's just Interesting question for me. Every movie that was D&D thematic was a disappointment from what I
That's
imagine.
very accurate. How long have we been waiting for a good D&D movie? Decades.
Well, that's because Matt is as much of an old curmudgeon as.
Go ahead and finish your. Yeah, I know, right? Go ahead and finish your thought, Cher.
Well, like I said about Supernatural, or even like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. These were
Love
all very
Buffy.
alternate fantasy shows, and these were like in the 90s, like early 2000s, like fantasy like shows started to pop up, and I think it kind of like greased the wheels for like D&D shows to come into play.
Yeah,
because
Well, I think
superhero shows.
Yeah.
How long? I mean, how long as kids? How many rat shit superhero movies came out? The original Captain America, the old Spider-Mans, the fucking first Punisher. I think. I don't know if it's fair to say that, but with the advent, when was Iron Man? Was that 2000, 2008?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's
maybe that's a little late, but I guess where I'm going is there's a lot of money in the comics bringing that to life, to the screen, and I think that, to your point, Sharon, may have kind of helped. Like, oh, it's now okay to spend $50 million to make a movie about people running around with swords and actually do it well and do it justice.
Yeah.
Well, I think looking at the list,
MacGyver was the best superhero.
That was good. Yeah. But once again, how many shows ended up being? Yeah.
Yes,
definitely.
thank you.
Well, and
again, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I mean, Torchseer brings up a really good point about generational realities, right? With Princess Bride. One of the things I think all of these late 90s, early 2000 influences had on the 3.5 and later editions, I'm going to ignore 4th edition for now, but I would also say on a lot of independent titles that were coming out at the time, was the idea that a game could be emotional. Because you had all these inspired shows and movies coming out exploring things like gender, relationships, family relationships, professional career, our relationship with, our understanding of society. And those became the backdrops and the background story to this amazing opportunity to create these themes and these settings for people to be allowed and feel safe in a new way of kind of playing a game. So I really felt that the Hollywood revolution of inspired or inspiring D&D commentary, and the acceptance that Hollywood finally gave it in the 2000s, really
I'm gonna jump in.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in right there because it's a perfect segue. Sharon, go over your celebrity D&D player list, because
this is a good list
too, I think, has a huge influence, and there's another aspect of culture that I want to bring up when you're done with the list. So go through what you found there.
It is.
Well, so is Star Wars, for that matter. Yeah. Although I would argue Star Wars more so because they have swords.
Well, that, and it was based on samurais. But yeah, go over your list.
Was it really?
Yeah, actually, it was based on 7 samurai. Is what it was based on.
Space.
Yeah, they even had space elves. It's very true. They're called or not Klingons, but they're called
Vulcans.
Vulcans, yeah.
Oh, that's right, huh?
Yeah, that's true.
Crazy.
I will send after our show today, Cher, I'm going to send you a link to a movie called The 7 Samurai. When you watch that, it's all in subtitles, but when you watch it, you'll understand why I compare it to Star Wars. It's
direct correlation.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay, so Sharon, celebrity D&D players.
I demand you do Joe's name first.
Okay, so first one hot off the list, as requested by Jason, because he's a total fanboy of this guy.
And I can't pronounce it to save my life.
Joe Manganiello.
Who is also aka Arcan the Cruel.
Yeah,
from,
I love that
Critical
character.
Role.
Yeah.
He also runs a private campaign amongst other celebrities as well, such as Tom Morello, Vince Vaughn. I'm not sure if The Big Show is part of his crew, but the
I
Big
think
Show.
Patton Oswalt plays with him.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He might,
I
yeah.
think.
But I think
By the way,
Patton
have
also
you seen
plays
Joe Megan?
with. I think Patton also plays with what's his name from Rick and Morty that used to have the adventure series on YouTube.
Adventure Zone.
I can't remember the name of it, but it was pretty.
Um,
It's very much a parody, and it was funny. It was really fun to watch.
Have you seen Joe Manganiello's basement room where they play?
I know, right?
Yeah,
Sharon's light face just lit up. Did you see that?
Unbelievable.
It was supposed to be a wine cellar, and it became like a.
Well, his wife gave it to him. Yeah, his wife gave it to him and said, she felt the rest of the house was kind of theirs, but mostly hers, especially a lot of the stuff that she personally designed. And he built it as he calls it the Gygax Dungeon, as an homage to the creator space. So
second on the list is, I think, Jim's Fungin, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's
So,
Rainn Wilson.
Jim? Go ahead.
Rainn Wilson plays?
Yeah, he plays D&D.
Oh my god!
This is the guy from The Office who also plays as Dwight. If you guys don't know.
Yep. Of course.
And next one is Aubrey Plaza. She's actually from Parks and Rec, who plays.
Holy crap! He really is like a major nerd.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
He was even dressing up as like as an online LARPer, like that alien guy. I forgot his name.
That's crazy.
Witcher actor is oh Christ, what's his name?
Witcher Superman actor.
Yeah.
I always forget his name.
God.
Vin Diesel plays D&D.
Yeah, he loves playing D&D.
And you know what's cool is that the Last Witch Hunter, to kind of bounce off of that comment, the Last Witch Hunter was actually based on his D&D character. They just like tweaked the name, and that was pretty much it.
Henry
Cavill.
That
was really cool.
Henry Cavill. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So you could say that that's kind of a D&D movie, sort of. The Last Witch Hunter.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But once again, the idea of the influence being the influencer, I think D&D now spends a lot more time potentially influencing things than being influenced anymore.
Yeah.
I think in the 80s and the 90s, it was probably the other way around. Because we didn't really have all those different ways of absorbing things that could become games. But now there's so many opportunities to play the game differently. 6mm tabletop D&D, battletop D&D, these new solo adventures that are popping up. People are writing rules and mechanics for solo D&D now. And I feel like D&D is now becoming more of an acceptable tabletop game. I think for the longest time, for the last 15 years was RPG, is what it felt like. And before it was RPG.
I utterly disagree with solo D&D. The whole game is
I haven't played it yet. I just know that people are building that way.
Yeah, play a video game. Goddamn, sit there with your friends. So the reason you got more on the list, Sharon?
No, I'm good.
There's,
Go ahead, Sharon.
Stephen Colbert, who also played a one shot with Matt Mercer for the what is it called? The Red Nose Day.
Yep.
That was so awesome.
And my favorite name on that list, Cher, can you guess which is my favorite name on that list that you made?
Ashley Johnson?
No, Deborah Ann. He's an amazing DM, just absolutely phenomenal DM. Just amazing.
I didn't know Jon Favreau actually played. That's pretty amazing to me.
There's an interview with him on a chef show that he was doing.
Yes. He did that
Netflix one.
After he did the movie Chef.
Yeah, and he learned how to cook for it.
Yeah.
And he said, "Hey, I'm just one of those guys. I would just stay at home and try to level up my thief." When he inserted that into his interview, and I just thought it was amazing.
Yeah, and then there's Tim Duncan, who's from the NBA. He actually has a tattoo of his D&D character, which is a wizard, and I thought that was really cool.
Shit.
Yeah.
I've heard that before. I was surprised. Once again, back to your nerd versus jock reference at the beginning of the list, right? That the way that society used to split everybody in the past. Like, I feel like that's gone now.
Mhm.
You know, I feel like in the consumer space of how we consume games, that old method is gone.
And that's where I was leading up with this list is
Right.
once again, to talk about the generational aspect, which you and I are familiar with, but Sharon less so, or in a different way.
Right.
When we were kids, it was like, yeah, okay, well, we're the nerds and we play in our basement with our group of friends and we don't fucking talk about it or tell anybody because, oh, well, you're a nerd, you play D&D.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't know if, these people came out because the game is okay to play or if them coming out has made it more mainstream, but it is now, it still amazes me. Not only is it okay, and it's ridiculous to even use these terms because it's so fucking stupid that it was never not okay to play, if it bothered you to be labeled a nerd. I never really gave a shit, to be honest. But it's now like it's more than just accepted that you play. But I can't tell you, like, people that I would never expect, my wife being one of them, to say, "Oh, I've always been interested in playing, or I want to play, or I want to give it a try." It just blows my mind because it was such the antithesis of that when we were kids. And I think it's great, Sharon, that you are in this time that it is so prevalent now and making these inroads, not even making, it's made it, okay, into mainstream, Hollywood movies, TVs. People come out in interviews and just insert, oh yeah, I've always been a D&D nerd, like these celebrities. It's really, and that kind of goes with what you were saying also about the game being that it's okay to be emotional, or the game can have emotion. It's not just, you're not just sitting down playing Monopoly. Somebody says,
Right,
"Oh, I'm
right.
a Monopoly buff," and it's the end of the conversation. Somebody says, "I play D&D," and there's an hour story to follow that up with.
Right. And that's why I put from nerds to jocks, because in a sense, like, because like even in Stranger Things, it shows that, that parallel, like they're nerds playing, D&D, but nowadays it's like it's very widely accepted and people actually want to play. And these nerds are now becoming the jocks of the game. Like, hey, I'm playing this game. This is for everyone to show and tell now. So
exactly.
That's why I put
but I mean,
there.
Stranger Things was accurate in that portrayal because it's late 80s, or where's the show in season 4? Is it still the 80s or is it not?
Yeah, late 80s now. I
Late
want to say
80s,
like
so-
80, like 87.
Yeah.
Like,
so
it felt like the iterations of Stranger Things was like 83 to 87.
Yes.
Is kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, they were very honest in telling that part of how D&D actually was back then.
Yeah,
And
totally.
Just like even like literally the jock, he was totally on it about saying that it was like a satanic cult and that they were hunting them, but spoiler alert, sorry guys. Sorry.
Oh, when they chop off Nancy's head, that was crazy.
Oh,
Well, here's a good follow-up question from DubTech. I think it's a very good point to take on because
what influence do you think esports had on the acceptability of D&D?
I think the big thing,
the
big thing that esports introduced for acceptability is the online audience. The idea that you could take something to an online environment and share it at a broadcast level and find out if people were going to enjoy watching it or not, or use it as a space. The only thing that esports does differently is it's a competitive environment. And I don't feel like D&D, I mean, the conventions always offered an opportunity up for competition-based gaming for D&D and other types of tabletop games. But D&D was never designed to be a competitive kind of, mainstream approach to the game. But I think what esports proved, well, I mean, unless you want to be toxic and never get another game again, more than welcome to try to make it competitive. But I think what esports proved to the world is that the online reality was here to stay. It was going to be here to stay. And that was another avenue that D&D could find themselves into. It's a good question.
I mean, I really hate to say it because I think, I'll keep that opinion.
No,
out of
you
it,
have to say it now.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I hate this now because now I'm really going to sound like an old fuck. I really think that, the internet and social media is really the medium by which D&D was able to achieve. Thinking on it, it's based at the computer upend everything that was societal normal. Everything post that was different in what success looked like. Yeah,
I think that was the same. I think that was the same basement troll nerds that when they were done painting their Ral Partha miniatures, they were over at their workbench building their Apple computers or building their Altairs. Or I think that's another good, it's another good commentary on the nerd environment of one generation and how that nerd environment has now moved into Sharon's generation and what that looked like and what that absorbed and consumed all the way up until, the newer generations now embracing it.
It's way more accessible now.
And that's my point with the internet and social media. I mean, like many things, it has had such a profound effect on us as a society and as a culture, very good in a lot of ways and very bad in a lot of ways, as we've seen. But I think for the game, it has really, it was the pivotal point, I think, that at least it was the door that opened, for D&D to achieve what it has become now in the mainstream. So I think the internet was just the door, and it made it easier for it to arrive where it has. All these other things we've talked about, I think, came as a result of that. That's
for esport. As an esport follow-up, Torchseer brings up a good point. Suddenly, hand-eye coordination had an athletic appeal. The ability to retain information in such a way that you're pulling out information out of your mind to use it as a skill set began to change things. A slight tangent. The idea of, I would love to ask, was Harry Potter inspired, by D&D to a certain degree?
Sure.
I know that Harry Potter probably has a more of a societal, systemic question about acceptance of people just being different and how society challenges that. But it feels a little D&D. Of course, we go back to the hero's journey, but I would probably say the very last two parts of Harry Potter were very D&D. The climactic struggle to win the great battle over the big boss definitely felt, D&D to me.
Isn't there a D&D module that's similar to Harry Potter? Isn't there?
I mean,
there's like a Magic Academy.
Well, I know they came out with the
chat. Help me.
I know that D&D Beyond came out with that content where the whole thing takes place in like a university or whatever. But as far as older stuff, going back, there's always been kind of Harry Potter-esque approaches.
Is it like Strixhaven?
Yes.
Strixhaven.
Thank you, Torchseer.
I think that's the modern interpretation of it.
Yeah.
I think I've watched Guild Superior play Harry Potter TTRPG. Like they play a Harry Potter inspired themed game, and they run a short.
I got another one. Goonies.
Yeah, Goonies. Absolutely. I'm not sure how I missed that one.
I am actually sad I didn't put Goonies.
But I mean, I would definitely partition Goonies alongside like Last Unicorn, Labyrinth.
But again, it was that, it was that journey that you speak of, and it was also like such an element of childlike fantasy and imagination, and it was
the Dragonlance influence.
Yeah.
The Dragonlance influence is a significant. The Hickman Weiss, catalog of 250 books in the Dragonlance world. I mean, that's a lot of inspiration for sure. Oh, I love. Yeah, if you guys could think of anything else, share it with us because
Yeah, chat, you're on fire tonight.
yeah, you're bringing up some good points. So, I know we don't have a whole lot of time left. What is on everybody's like? Considering the way D&D is right now, the way it goes and everything, what do you think is the next inspired theme for D&D? Like where do we think this thing is going to? Like, what is it doing?
Are you specifically talking? I mean, Spelljammer.
Like
When you say that,
media-wise?
No, I
Spelljammer
just
is the
think
first
from
thing
a
that pops
culture
in my mind.
perspective. What do you think the next culture, or not culture? What do you think the next generation is going to do with it? Like, I have a 6-month-old as of tomorrow, right?
VR.
I have, well, yeah, it's a good point. I think it's, that's a really good point. Is the next
LARPing.
generational theme going to be more digital, more interactive, more integrated? Because I see a lot of unique things popping up in the VR community, like an entire VR table that people play at now. I've seen that before on the Dungeon Run when they were experimenting with different ways to play remotely. I thought that was fascinating to see it. But once again, that technology always has that little bit of weirdness that doesn't quite have the elbows on the tables staring at Sharon as she casts fireball and destroys everybody inadvertently, I mean, I miss that. I miss that tactile, physical,
I
around
still
the table.
too. I still do too. But I could also see, D&D Ready Player One, basically.
Yeah.
And I could also see another aspect I could see is kind of the combination of the at the table and the remote of maybe drawing in the audience as part of the actual game. Almost like a Choose Your Own Adventure. Where the audience basically kind of is participatory in the story itself. That'd be kind of cool.
Didn't Critical Role do something where they had the audience make NPCs or something? Like they had them name the NPCs? If not, that's a great idea. I'm just saying.
I think they may have done something along those lines at one of their live shows.
Yeah,
but
I think it was at their New York show that they did that.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think it was just naming an NPC or.
Mm-hmm.
There's another show that capitalized on that idea called the Dungeon Run.
There you go.
And the Dungeon Run, people can influence the game via the procurement of things like advantage or play card or some kind of token that they get involved with the game, right? This obviously it's a way for a show to turn it into a monetized system, but it's also a way to pull in people into it that maybe wouldn't be interested in being, playing the game.
I could also, I could see that coming full circle, especially with, with the full setups of terrain, like you see Inked Mage. If you follow him, comes to mind, where it's just like, I don't think the at the table experience is ever going away. I think it is.
No, I think it'll become.
I think it is
more
so inherent in.
That's the soul.
I think it'll become more or less a rarity, though. I think if your option is to wait for a game where you have access to 20 people, or you go play online where you have access to 1 million people, it's always going to be that parity shift of I can either wait for months and hopefully play the game, or I can immediately start playing, just not having that tactile experience. Now, for a generation growing up online, that may be the best answer because they're already socially kind of integrated into that style of play, whether it's console, PC, or however their online experience is. If they have more of that experience rather than the table experience, it may be a better fit. I think the baby boomer generation views tabletop playing as nostalgia, right? And then the X-Geners embrace tech, but they also love the feel of the tactile game.
But let me ask you this, though.
Yeah.
I mean, back then, the wargs are at the gate.
It sounds like a very tiny warg.
Bite your ankles off, you will. again, I'll go generational. We didn't have access to other players other than who else in school is a nerd and plays. Now, you're right. You may not have access to, a million people out there wanting to play, but I can go out and find any in-person game in Chicago right now and pretty
But
much
I would
be able
say
to
that it's
play.
way more challenging than an online game. I think
Well,
an
of course
online
it
game
is.
could be challenging to facilitate, but I feel like a live dedicated table game could be a lot more challenging to replicate.
Well, you know
Well, I want to
what?
hear
There's
Sharon's. I want to
actually
hear
like,
Sharon's opinion since she is of this new generation. So, what
Yeah.
are your thoughts?
well, first off, I'm thinking like in the future, D&D will become like very mainstream, like basically how like video games got really accepted and they had their like own game channel called like G4 and stuff like that. I think D&D will have something like that where like big shows like Dimension 20 and Critical Role can have their own dedicated like channel or service on TV. And D&D will definitely become way more widespread and accessible online. There's going to be dedicated services for that, just like for Meetup, but instead it will be at an actual site where you can actually go and find the different locations, like whether it's online or at taverns or bars that actually
Yeah.
are geek bars, which I already know a few off the hand that host in-game D&D.
I
So-
do miss going to the game
running.
store and running
I'm running
a game.
I'm running a bachelor party in September for a group that wants to do a game at a place a few blocks from me, and that's
Well,
how
I've-
Adam started with the D&D club.
Yeah.
He was doing local games in Ohio and had enough foresight to, once COVID started, say, hey, let's do this remotely. So, yeah.
Well,
Which is
I definitely want to be able to rent out my studio more often to birthday parties. I just don't really know how to kind of get that word out there and how to organize or manage that. But the idea of getting a group of, teenagers or kids in here to play D&D as a birthday party. I've done that once, and that was last year.
totally agreed.
Mhm.
Twisted.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think for somebody who is past that level of intimidation and knows about the game, I would venture to say, all of the mechanics of trying to get that game together and keep it going. I would venture to say that people would rather be at a live table than remote. But that is a very good point. It is very intimidating.
And I think tables tend to be more like-minded and a little bit more of a coffee filter for the way people are expected to play. So I really enjoy my stranger tables better. I love putting together a table of strangers for the first time and watching it blossom into this amazing story. My Tuesday game, my 3 to 6 game, Seilun's Gift, which is an adventure that takes place probably 40 years after season 3, which I do that on purpose, but it's not important to explain. I had one of the most amazing experiences, and both players, both Troy and Kat, they're both young, so I was a little nervous about it being played out appropriately, but their characters were gradually falling in love, like in the game. And they were playing it so respectfully and doing such an amazing RPG towards it, or an RP towards it, that it was the final affirmation I was looking for in my overall career as a storyteller. That they felt so comfortable and so safe.
That's awesome.
They did it in their cultural sense of a hookup. Like, the other 3 characters were off trying to figure out the Pallid One's mind palace and were having their own little side adventure. They had left Lexus and Umbrellas in the submersible, and they found themselves alone for the first time for an extended period of time. And they played out this amazing role play of 2 people that have been toying with the idea of their characters falling in love, finally having their physical interaction and confirming each other's love. But it wasn't done in a, like a kind of, any kind of way that would be considered toxic or negative or unprofessional.
It was natural.
And for me, the affirmation came from the fact they felt safe enough to do it.
Yeah.
That they were so immersed in this game and their characters so well developed in their own minds, they felt perfectly safe with me as the narrator of the experience, not being that kind of cringy DM that goes, oh, that's gross, you can't do that, or yeah, you're really giving it to her, aren't you? That kind of like just very negative experience that maybe people have had out there. And
Yeah.
we know the social media reality is 1% fantasy and 99% subtext. So it's like it gets consumed very differently, and that made me feel good. That was Tuesday. I felt amazing. I felt a 41-year career of playing games in general, and then obviously being a pro DM and having the absolute blessing of running 11 tables. Just it all culminated that day for me. Just kind of like I kind of felt that way for our Saturday game, Barry, because you guys gave me these intimate one-on-ones surviving that major part of the campaign, and all of you felt like your character grew. Like all of you felt like your characters actually grew, became something else, which we always talked about at the beginning of those campaigns. You may think you are what you are now, but I can guarantee you by the end of that game, you're going to be something different. Whatever that difference is going to be up to you to determine that. And I think that's the generational thing that we're missing now. I love my Zoomies and I love my millennials and I love some of my fellow X-Geners. And I love my new Y generations that are going to be exploring this. There's a reason why I left a generation out, because I have my own personal opinion on that and I won't bore people with it. But I feel like these generations of integrated people playing together and sharing both fantasy and some real life experiences that can kind of pop up in these new friendships is the very nature of the generational idea of playing the game.
I have a question for Sharon. I think what you said is it's fantastic. It really is. And I think, in my opinion, I think that is the reason why, to answer one of your earlier questions, is that why people can actually sit and watch other people play D&D. Okay?
Yeah.
I think as a player, it's fair to say everybody loves rolling dice. Okay? Role-playing sessions are awesome, but you go too many sessions without rolling dice and people get bored. I think as a viewer, it's also safe to say that watching combat becomes extremely rote and mechanical, and the role-playing is what you love watching. So my question to you, Sharon, is, do you equate, like for you, is playing D&D and watching D&D all part of the same thing, or did you start? I know you started by watching.
Yeah.
So for you, I kind of feel like for you, or your generation, playing and watching others play is kind of all the same animal. Whereas for us, like the notion of watching other people play, at first it was like, really?
Well,
in a way.
Well, give us your opinion on that, Cher. Like, because obviously I'm a little jaded in the answer because I'm her first campaign. But yet she also has consumed a lot of the shows. So, what are your thoughts on that, Cher?
I mean, honestly, it's like I love D&D. I love watching it and I love playing it.
But do they feel different to you? Do they feel different?
Yes, just because I feel more involved playing, and like I feel like it's because my actions matter with this character that I'm playing. When I'm watching, I am emulating the thoughts and feelings they might have, the people that are playing, like, oh wow, that's so sad, or like, like at the end of campaign 1 when they fight Vecna and like, Scanlan wanted to use that wish, like there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of like role play and feelings between like the characters and the players. Like you feel it, because you're experiencing it with the people when you're watching it. But it's different when you're playing because, man, you want your actions to matter, and you do want to save the world. You do want to protect your friends. So,
It's a great point.
yeah.
Well,
That's a great
I
point.
think we should end there because I don't think we can top that sentiment. So
That's an awesome way, and I love how you recognize the difference and got the feels out of that. I think that sums it up.
I'm happy to keep going because I'm happy to keep going because I think we can keep talking about this, but I think that's a good sentiment to end on personally.
Yeah, it was awesome. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for coming out today. That was a lot of fun. And
yes, wait. Rollies.
Rollies!
Oh, yeah,
Rollies to see who closes out.
Hey, Paradox, roll for me if you're listening. Roll that exclamation D20 for me in the chat.
Jesus Christ. Last time we did this, what did I roll? A 2. What did I roll? A 2.
That's kind of spooky. I'm going to see if Paradox is still on. If he's still on, I'll have him roll. Otherwise, I'll roll online.
Sharon, what'd you get? Good night, Twisted.
You got a 20.
Frickin' 20. All right, well, you win. All right, Jason, roll.
Did I do that wrong?
I think you got a slash.
That with modifiers?
Is it 1d20?
No, slash D20.
Is it slash? No, it's not slash. Exclamation D20?
All right.
There it is. I rolled an 18.
Okay.
I rolled an 18.
You probably got about 7,000 dice in that fucking room behind you.
No, actually, I don't. They belong to Callista. I don't. I literally, I only have about 40 or 30 dice. I don't have a lot of dice.
Oh, just about 40.
All right. So Sharon, close us out, please.
All right. Well, I would like to echo the sentiment that I previously stated. We all come together to play D&D to tell a story, but it's also a human experience that we share with one another, and everybody's welcome at the table to experience that. Each and every one of us. And there isn't one story that anyone brings to the table that isn't more or less. It's beautiful in its entirety. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining us tonight for RPG&Co's Lawfully Chaotic. We will see you next week for our next topic.
And where can they find you at, Barrybot?
You can find me at Instagram at Barrybot, and you can also catch me on Saturday nights at 4 to 7 p.m. Pacific time on the D&D Club's The Graying Lands. Tune in this week.
Awesome.
Brian, where are you at these days?
As always, easiest place to get me is Instagram, RPG&Co. But you can also follow the link tree. Jesus, I'm really fucking bad.
Yeah,
at
it's
this.
weird.
Linktree/rpgandco.com.
And you can find me, the storyteller, at TTRPG Academy. That is my Instagram. That is my Twitters. You can also find my Linktree at TTRGB Academy. That has access to all of our socials. If you head on over to my channel, you can find all my socials there as well. And you know what? Amazing show, everybody. Thank you so much.
Amazing show.
And we will see you.
Thank you, Sharon, for putting together all the research and the topic.
Yeah.
Oh, what's next week's topic? Or do we want to think about it?
Ooh, good point. What are your thoughts, Sharon?
Let's think about it.
Let's talk a little bit more after the show because there's a couple feedback things that I think helped us a lot tonight. Yeah. And I want to talk about that part. So,
well, you know what, chat, if you want to quickly toss out anything that you would like us to discuss, feel free to shout that out. You could also message us on Discord as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
So thanks everybody for coming out.
Thank you.
We will linger a bit afterwards, but thanks everybody.
See
Bye.
you
Be safe. Be kind. Play a game. It's good for your mental health. Bye, everybody.